In the hushed courtroom of Willow Creek, whispers sharpened into daggers, when Judge Tate revealed the missing Social Security fortune, a niece's trust, an aunt's deception, and a locked drawer turned a family's secret into a battle for truth and freedom. The courtroom in Willow Creek was too bright for the kind of shadows that clung to Althea Monroe's heart. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale glow across the polished oak benches, the state seal, and the raised platform where Judge Harmon presided. The room buzzed with muted whispers, restless coughs, the shifting of papers. At 26, Althea felt both too young and far too old to be sitting here, on trial not for a crime but for her life story. Her mother had died when she was only 9. Her father had been gone before she was born. All she'd had left was her aunt, her mother's sister, who had taken her in. At least, that was what the world believed. Althea sat stiffly at the defendant's table, though technically she wasn't the one being accused. Her aunt, Martha Cross, had filed a civil petition demanding repayment for the costs of raising her niece. An invoice, cold, neat, and itemized. $50,000. The figure had loomed over Althea ever since her attorney handed her the document, typed in Martha's meticulous script. It listed every supposed expense: groceries, clothing, utilities, schooling, medical care, extracurriculars. Each line read less like compassion and more like a business contract, as if Althea's childhood had been a ledger, her existence a transaction. Althea's attorney, Daniel Keene, leaned close. He was in his 40s, wiry, sharp-eyed, and known around Willow Creek for being relentless. "Remember," he whispered, "say nothing unless I signal. Today is about listening." Althea nodded, though her throat felt tight. Across the aisle, Martha sat at her table, her posture regal, her silver-streaked hair twisted into a severe bun. She wore a charcoal gray suit that made her look more like a corporate executive than the small-town florist she had once pretended to be. Her lips curved in something between a smirk and a sneer, and when her gaze flicked toward Althea, it was a blade, sharp, gleaming, meant to cut. Case 19 CV 473, the clerk announced. Cross vs. Monroe. Claim of financial restitution. Judge Harmon adjusted his glasses and looked down at the file in front of him. He was a tall man, balding, with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too many lies unravel in his courtroom. "Martha Cross," he said, "you claim you raised your niece after her mother's death and are owed compensation for her upbringing, totaling $50,000? "Yes, Your Honor." Martha's voice was smooth, self-assured. She slid a document across the table with practiced ease. "This is the invoice I've prepared. Every expense accounted for, down to the penny." The judge studied the document in silence. The courtroom hushed. Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. Althea's palms sweated as she tried not to fidget. 1,000 memories rushed her. The nights she cried herself to sleep on a thin mattress, the times Martha had reminded her she was a burden, the way food was rationed like charity. None of that was on the invoice. Finally, Judge Harmon looked up. "This is quite thorough. Food, clothing, shelter, medical bills, even school supplies." Martha inclined her head. "I sacrificed much for this girl, Your Honor. I deserve to be repaid." Daniel stood. "Objection to the premise, Your Honor. Guardianship after a parent's death is not a commercial transaction." The judge held up a hand. "We'll get to that. First, I have a question." He tapped the paper lightly. His voice dropped, slow and deliberate. "Mrs. Cross, where is the accounting for the Social Security survivor benefits you collected?" Martha blinked. I beg your pardon?" The judge leaned forward, his glasses catching the light. "My records show you began collecting Social Security survivor benefits on behalf of Miss Monroe when her mother died. Payments were made to you as her guardian for nearly 10 years. He shuffled through the file, pulled out a document, and read aloud. "Total sum collected, $190,000. The words hit like thunder. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, a few outright shouts. Someone dropped a pen that clattered against the tile, sharp as gunfire in the tense silence. Althea froze, her breath caught in her chest. $190,000? Her head spun. She remembered no luxuries, no comforts. Just thrift store clothes, budget meals, and lectures about how expensive she was. Where had it all gone? Martha's face drained of color, then flushed an angry red. "That money was for her care," she stammered. The judge's gaze was steel. "Then why is your invoice for $50,000? Where's the rest?" Daniel rose slowly, his expression a mask of grim satisfaction. "Your Honor, my client has long suspected financial mismanagement by her guardian. It appears today we may finally uncover the truth." Martha slammed her hands on the table. "Lies. I gave up everything for that girl." The judge's gavel cracked once, silencing the room. "Enough. This court will not tolerate outbursts. He leaned back, eyes still fixed on Martha. But I expect answers, and if I don't get them, I will order a full financial audit. Althea's pulse thundered in her ears. The walls seemed to close in around her, the air thick with the scent of wood polish and sweat. For the first time in years, she felt a crack in the armor of lies Martha had built around her life. And through that crack, something stirred. Hope. The hearing adjourned shortly after, but the storm it had unleashed would not be contained. As the bailiff announced recess, Althea caught Martha's eyes across the room. No longer smug. No longer serene. There was fear there now, raw and unmasked. But also something else. A warning. As Althea gathered her things with trembling hands, she knew this was only the beginning. The past she thought she understood was about to unravel, and the truth, whatever it was, would not come without a fight. The courthouse steps felt like a cliff edge. Althea stood there, clutching her file of papers to her chest, her breath clouding in the crisp September air. Around her, reporters muttered into phones, attorneys hurried past, and strangers craned their necks for gossip, but all she could hear were the judge's words echoing in her skull. "Where is the $190,000 you collected?" That number pulsed through her veins like a drumbeat. She'd been told all her life that she was a weight, a cost, a responsibility her aunt had nobly shouldered. $50,000 was a cruel sum to demand repayment for, but $190,000 in survivor's benefits? It rewrote her entire past. "Althea," Daniel Keene said at her side, pulling her out of her spiral. His voice was steady, clipped with his usual efficiency. "Don't talk to anyone. We'll regroup in my office tomorrow morning. Today, let her stew." She nodded, but words caught in her throat. Daniel gave her a firm look, then turned to stride down the sidewalk, already answering a call. He was a man always in motion. Althea lingered. The courthouse behind her loomed tall and solemn, its windows glaring down like watchful eyes. She hugged her coat tighter around herself and began the walk back to her car. Each step felt heavy, pulling her deeper into memories she had tried for years to bury. Her earliest memory after her mother's funeral was of Martha's house. The smell of lilies always clung to it. Her aunt worked with flowers, though the business was small. The house itself was narrow and dark, filled with ticking clocks and walls lined with porcelain figurines that seemed to watch Althea with blank, judgmental stares. "You'll stay in the spare room," Martha had told her that first day, a hand on her shoulder that was meant to be comforting but pressed down just a little too hard. "And you'll be grateful. Do you understand?" Althea had nodded. She was 9 years old, small for her age, and grief sat on her chest like a stone. She hadn't known how to protest. The room had smelled of mothballs and stale perfume. A single bed with a thin mattress, a dresser with drawers that stuck, curtains that never seemed to close all the way. "Don't touch my things," Martha had said sharply when Althea's gaze lingered on the porcelain collection. "They're not toys." That night, Althea had lain in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the tick-tick-tick of the clocks. She had whispered into the dark, "Mom?" but only silence answered. The memories came faster now, like old film reels unspooling too quickly. School lunches wrapped in wax paper, always plain, always the cheapest option. Other kids had juice boxes and chips. She had an apple and a sandwich with bread already stale. When she complained, Martha's answer had been the same every time. "You're expensive. Be grateful you have food at all." Birthdays with no cake, no gifts, just Martha's reminder. "I feed you, clothe you, shelter you. That's enough." The ledger voice, always counting, always keeping score. At 12, Althea had wanted to join the school's art club. The supply fee was $15. She had begged Martha, promised to work around the house to earn it. "Art won't feed you," Martha had snapped. "Do you think money grows on trees? We're already drowning because of you." The words had burned into her, guilt searing deeper than hunger ever had. But now she knew Martha had been receiving checks every month. Not struggling, not scraping by, lying. Althea stopped halfway down the block, gripping a lamppost as the realization struck. For years she had believed she was a burden, the reason her aunt couldn't afford better clothes or a nicer car, but the money had been there. Where had it gone? A cold wind swept the street, whipping her hair into her face. She brushed it back, her fingers trembling. One memory surfaced sharper than the rest. She was 16. It was late, long after midnight. She had crept out of her room for a glass of water, padding quietly past the living room. The glow of the television spilled into the hallway. Martha sat hunched on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand, stacks of envelopes spread across the coffee table. Althea paused in the shadows, heart thudding. She had never seen that many envelopes at once. Martha tore one open, pulled out a check, and smiled to herself, a smile Althea had never seen directed at her. Althea had slipped back to bed without the water, confusion gnawing at her. The next morning, when she had asked about it, Martha had slapped the question down. "Don't snoop, Althea. Those are bills. Do you want to live on the street? Then don't ask again." And she hadn't. Not then. Not until today. The memories turned darker. The way Martha had forbidden her from visiting friends too often, claiming gas was too expensive. The way she controlled every penny Althea earned from babysitting or summer jobs, household contribution, she called it. The way she reminded Althea, again and again, that no one else wanted her, that if she left, she'd have nothing. "You should thank me every day," Martha had said once, when Althea was 17 and dared to ask about college applications. "Without me, you'd be in foster care. Do you know what happens to kids in foster care? They disappear. They fail. I saved you." At the time, Althea had believed her, had swallowed the fear whole. But now, standing on the sidewalk outside the courthouse, Althea felt that trust fracture completely. It was as if a veil had been torn away, revealing a different childhood beneath. Not one of sacrifice. One of theft. Her phone buzzed, the screen lit up with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered, "Hello?" A pause, then a man's voice, low and unfamiliar. "Miss Monroe?" "Yes. Who is this?" "You don't know me, but I knew your mother. If you want answers about your aunt, meet me. Tonight, 7 o'clock, at the old greenhouse on River Road." Althea's chest tightened. "Who are you?" The line clicked dead. She stared at the screen, heart racing. The old greenhouse, abandoned for years, glass shattered, vines crawling over its frame. A warning siren blared in her mind, but curiosity roared louder. For the first time in her life, she realized, she didn't just want the truth. The old greenhouse loomed at the edge of River Road like a skeleton of glass and iron. Once, it had been a jewel of Willow Creek, a place where schoolchildren took field trips, where weddings were held amid orchids and roses. Now it was a ruin, its panes shattered, its frame rusted and wrapped in ivy. The moonlight spilled across broken glass, throwing fractured shadows on the ground. Althea hesitated at the gate, pulling her coat tighter. Her breath puffed in the cool night air. A part of her screamed to turn back, but another part, the louder one, whispered that she had lived too long in the dark already. Inside, her footsteps crunched over grit. The air smelled of damp earth and mildew. She stopped near the center, under the skeletal remains of a glass dome, and waited. A voice spoke from the shadows. "You look like her." She spun. A man stepped forward, his face half lit by moonlight. He was in his 50s, maybe older, with weathered skin and a gray beard trimmed close. His eyes, sharp, restless, fixed on her. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite herself. "My name's Leonard Price. I knew your mother. Worked with her before. Everything." His voice was gravel, low and weighted with memory. "I don't want to waste time. You need to know something." Althea's throat tightened. "About my aunt?" Leonard nodded. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Your aunt's been lying to you. I have proof." Althea's hands shook as she took the envelope. Inside were photocopies of documents, bank statements, check stubs, receipts. The numbers leapt off the page, regular deposits from the Social Security Administration, far larger than she ever imagined. Withdrawals in cash, transfers to accounts she didn't recognize, luxury store charges, out-of-town hotel stays, money drained fast and steady. She flipped through them, her vision blurring with disbelief. This can't be real. Leonard's gaze hardened. "It's real. Your aunt took every benefit meant for you. Almost 200 grand, and she didn't spend it on raising you. She spent it on herself." Althea's knees felt weak. She gripped the edge of a broken planter to steady herself. All those years of thrift, of being told she was a burden, of feeling shame every time she asked for something. Her whole childhood had been built on a lie. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why are you giving this to me?" Leonard shifted, his jaw tightening. "Because your mother trusted me once. And because Martha Cross isn't just greedy, she's dangerous. You start pulling at these threads, you'll find things you may not want to see." Althea looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" But Leonard only shook his head. "I've said enough for now. Get yourself a good investigator, someone who can dig. And be careful who you trust." Before she could stop him, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, his footsteps fading until only silence remained. Althea stood alone under the cracked dome, clutching the papers to her chest. The glass above rattled in the wind, like 1,000 faint warnings. The next morning, Althea sat in Daniel Keene's office, the envelope open between them. His jaw clenched tighter with every page he read. "This is more than mismanagement," he said finally. "This is fraud. Survivor benefits are meant for the child's welfare, not for personal vacations and jewelry." He looked up, eyes sharp. We'll need a forensic accountant. Someone who can trace every dollar. If this is solid, we can dismantle her case and possibly open a criminal one against her. Althea swallowed hard. Do you know anyone? Daniel leaned back in his chair. I know one. Claire Hensley. Ex-IRS, now works private. She doesn't miss a thing. The name felt like a lifeline. Then I'll hire her. Daniel studied her for a moment, his lawyer mask slipping just slightly. Althea, this won't be easy. Once your aunt realizes you're digging, she won't sit quietly. Be prepared for her to fight back. Althea nodded, her hands clenched in her lap. She's been fighting me my whole life. I'm done letting her win. 2 days later, Althea met Claire Hensley at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. Claire was in her late 30s, with a brisk manner and eyes that seemed to read everything at once. You're the niece, Claire said, sliding into the booth with a laptop bag. Let's see what we've got. Althea handed her the envelope. Claire scanned the pages quickly, her brow furrowing. Humph. Amateur. If she thought this wouldn't leave a trail, she's dumber than I thought. Althea blinked. So you can prove it? Oh, I can prove it. Claire opened her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Bank records don't vanish. Transfers, deposits, tax filings, they leave footprints. And if your aunt's arrogant enough to think nobody would ever check? Even better. She glanced up. But once I dig, I'll stir the hornet's nest. She'll know someone's onto her. Althea hesitated, then forced herself to nod. Do it. I want the truth. Claire smiled thinly. Good. Just remember, truth has a price. That night, Althea lay awake in her apartment, staring at the ceiling. The weight of the day pressed down on her. Leonard's warning echoed in her mind. Martha isn't just greedy. She's dangerous. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number lit the screen. Stop digging. Some things are better left buried. Her blood ran cold. She sat up, heart pounding. Outside her window, the street was quiet, the lamppost casting its lonely glow. But Althea couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching. Willow Creek looked ordinary enough from the outside. Quaint brick storefronts, tidy sidewalks, the old clock tower chiming on the hour. But to Althea, walking its streets in the weeks after the courthouse revelation, every shadow seemed sharper, every whispered conversation tinged with suspicion. She used to think she knew this town. She had gone to school here, worked her first job here, bought her first car from a used lot on Main Street. But now, with Claire digging into her aunt's finances and Leonard's warning echoing in her ears, Willow Creek felt like a stage where everyone played a role, hiding the truth behind polite smiles. Claire's investigation moved fast. She had set up in a spare office in Daniel Keene's law firm, her laptop glowing well into the night. Your aunt funneled money through 3 different accounts, she explained one evening as Althea sat across from her, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold. 2 under her name, 1 under a shell business, Cross Floral Imports. Looks legitimate, but I've traced the outflow. Jewelry stores, a car dealership 2 towns over, cash withdrawals that don't match her reported income. Althea's stomach churned. So she's been laundering it? Claire shrugged. More like spending it while pretending it's business. But here's the kicker. She slid a printout across the desk. A transfer, $25,000, from her account to a man named Victor Dempsey. Recognize him? Althea shook her head. Claire leaned back. He's not nobody. Dempsey owns half the rental properties in Willow Creek. And rumor has it, he's got the police chief in his pocket. The words hit Althea like a stone in her gut. It wasn't just about Martha anymore. Threads were connecting her aunt's greed to the veins of the town itself. 2 days later, Althea stopped at the Willow Creek Library. She hadn't been there in years, but she remembered the hushed quiet and the smell of paper and polish. She searched old newspapers on microfilm, scrolling through grainy headlines. One name kept surfacing: Victor Dempsey. His real estate acquisitions, his generous donations to local causes, even a photo of him smiling with her aunt at a charity gala. How deep does this go? As she packed her things to leave, she noticed someone watching her from the far corner of the reading room. A man in a ball cap, pretending to flip through a magazine but glancing up too often. When she met his gaze, he looked away quickly. Her pulse quickened. She left the library, but as she walked to her car, the sensation of being followed prickled the back of her neck. She quickened her pace, slid into the driver's seat, and locked the doors. In her rear-view mirror, the man emerged from the library. He paused on the steps, scanning the parking lot. His eyes landed on her car. Althea started the engine and pulled out fast. That night, Daniel called. His voice was calm but edged. Be careful, Althea. I've heard whispers Martha's trying to rally support. People owe her favors. People you wouldn't expect. Like who? Like members of the town council. Maybe even the sheriff. She's painting you as ungrateful, unstable. If you push this case, You're not just exposing her, you're exposing half the town's dirty laundry. Althea gripped the phone tighter. I don't care. I won't stop. There was silence. Then Daniel sighed. That's what I was afraid you'd say. Just keep your eyes open. Willow Creek looks peaceful, but it isn't. The next morning, Althea returned to her apartment after a grocery run to find her front door ajar. Her heart seized. She stepped inside cautiously, her keys clenched like a weapon. The air smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. Nothing looked stolen, but on her kitchen table lay an envelope. No name, no stamp. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Walk away, or you'll regret it. Her hands shook as she dropped it back on the table. Fear rose in her chest, but beneath it burned something hotter. Anger. All her life, Martha had silenced her with shame, with control, with lies. Not this time. She snapped a photo of the note and sent it to Claire. Seconds later, Claire replied. This means we're getting close. Don't back down. I'll be at your place in 20. Althea sat at the table, staring at the note, listening to the hum of her refrigerator and the pounding of her heartbeat. For the first time, she realized the truth wasn't just hidden in ledgers or bank accounts. It was buried deep in Willow Creek itself, and pulling it into the light might tear the town apart. But she also realized something else. She wasn't alone anymore. And she wasn't afraid to fight. The note still sat on Althea's kitchen table when Claire arrived. The former IRS agent strode in briskly, scanned the paper once, and set it down with a grim expression. They're nervous, Claire said. Which means we're hitting nerves worth hitting. Althea hugged herself, still shaken. Or it means they're serious. What if they're willing to hurt me to shut me up? Claire's gaze softened only slightly. That's the risk, sweetheart. But silence is what people like your aunt count on. If you stop now, they win. And if they win, they'll bury everything. The words steadied Althea. She nodded. Then we don't stop. Claire's mouth curved in a thin smile. Good girl. Later that week, Claire called with an update. I've traced another account. This one's under your aunt's shell company. But guess who has co-signing privileges? Who? Victor Dempsey, your aunt's business partner, at least on paper. He's been helping her funnel money for years. And based on some deposits, I bet half the town council has taken a slice. Althea's skin prickled. So it wasn't just her. No, Claire said flatly. She didn't just hoard your survivor benefits. She used them as seed money. She and Dempsey built a network, laundering funds through fake floral imports, real estate, and political donations. That's how she stayed untouchable. She wasn't working alone. The words rang in Althea's ears. Untouchable. For years, she had believed Martha was just cruel, small-minded, a woman who hoarded pennies and controlled her out of spite. But this was worse. Her aunt had built power out of her stolen childhood. What do we do now? Althea asked, her voice low. We build a case that's bulletproof, Claire said. And we make sure the right people see it before they can bury it. That night, Althea pulled out an old shoebox from her closet, the one she had carried through every move, every apartment, every attempt to start fresh. It was filled with fragments of her childhood. A photograph of her mother holding her as a baby, a folded drawing she had made at 7, a crumpled flyer for the art club she had never joined. At the bottom lay a letter she had never opened. It was from her mother, written weeks before she died. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. The paper was yellowed with age, the ink smudged. My darling Althea, it began. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Please know that I love you more than anything. Martha has agreed to care for you. I trust she will use the benefits to keep you safe and give you every opportunity I cannot. Althea's chest ached. Her mother had believed Martha, trusted her, and Martha had twisted that trust into greed and power. At the bottom of the letter was a line that made her pause. If you ever feel lost, seek out Leonard. He was my friend, and he will protect you. Her breath caught. Leonard Price, the man from the greenhouse. Her mother had known he would be important. Maybe that was why Martha had kept Leonard's name out of reach all those years. The next day, Althea met Leonard again, this time in daylight at a diner on the edge of town. He sat in a corner booth, his hat pulled low, nursing a black coffee. You found me, he said, a ghost of a smile tugging his beard. My mother told me to, Althea said quietly, sliding into the seat across from him. She placed the letter on the table. Leonard read it, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he folded it carefully and pushed it back. Your mother was the best person I ever knew. She didn't deserve what happened. Althea leaned forward. Tell me the truth. How deep does this go? Leonard's eyes flicked around the diner, then back to her. Deeper than you think. Dempsey's not just a landlord. He launders money for people bigger than him. Your aunt helped. She was smart, ruthless. The two of them made a deal. She'd funnel the benefits and other cash through her floral import business, and he'd protect her. Cops, councilmen, judges, they all look the other way because Dempsey makes sure they get their cut. Althea's stomach twisted. So I'm not just fighting my aunt. I'm fighting half of Willow Creek. Maybe more, Leonard said softly. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the clatter of dishes and the hiss of the coffee machine. Finally, Leonard leaned closer. If you want to take her down, you'll need allies outside this town. Otherwise, they'll bury you before you get close. Althea swallowed hard. Then help me, please. Leonard studied her, his gaze heavy with something like regret. Then he nodded once. All right, but you need to understand, every lie costs something. And the closer you get to the truth, the higher the price will be. That evening, Althea returned home to find her apartment door locked, her windows intact. But when she stepped inside, her heart sank. On the coffee table sat another envelope. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph, her walking into the diner with Leonard earlier that day. On the back, written in black marker, "You're running out of time." Althea's hands shook as she set the photo down. Her aunt's face rose in her mind, not the mask of dignity Martha wore in court, but the raw, furious glare she'd seen when the judge had questioned her. Martha wasn't working alone. She never had. And now, Althea realized, neither could she. The courthouse was crowded the morning the trial resumed. News of Judge Harmon's pointed question, "Where's the $190,000?" had spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. Reporters lined the steps, microphones outstretched, cameras clicking as Althea made her way inside with Daniel and Claire. Althea kept her head down, though she felt the eyes of the crowd burn into her. Half the town seemed to have an opinion, some muttering that she was ungrateful, others whispering that Martha Cross's perfect mask had finally cracked. Inside, the courtroom smelled of coffee and floor polish. The murmur of voices swelled as spectators filled the benches. When Martha entered, heads turned. She wore her usual suit, but her poise was strained. Her lips pressed thin, her eyes sharp, her steps clipped. The judge took his seat, and the bailiff called the room to order. "Mrs. Cross," Judge Harmon said, "last we met, serious questions were raised about your handling of survivor benefits. Today, we will hear further testimony. Mr. Keene, call your first witness." Daniel rose. "Your Honor, the defense calls Claire Hensley." A ripple moved through the room as Claire stepped to the stand, sleek in a navy suit, her laptop bag slung over one shoulder. After swearing in, she sat tall, her voice crisp and confident. "I am a forensic accountant," she said. "I have reviewed the financial records related to this case. The Social Security survivor benefits totaling $190,000 were received by Mrs. Cross. Less than a third was spent on expenses that can reasonably be connected to Althea Monroe's care. The rest was redirected, through personal accounts, a shell business called Cross Floral Imports, and transfers to a Mr. Victor Dempsey." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Martha stiffened, her knuckles white against the table. Daniel stepped closer. "And in your professional opinion, Ms. Hensley, does this constitute misuse of funds?" "Yes," Claire said firmly. "It constitutes fraud." Martha shot to her feet. "Lies. That woman doesn't know me. Doesn't know what I sacrificed." The gavel cracked. "Mrs. Cross," Judge Harmon warned, "you will sit down and control yourself." Martha sank back into her chair, her jaw tight. Daniel paced slowly. "Ms. Hensley, do you have evidence to support these claims?" Claire nodded. "I do. Bank statements, tax filings, receipts, and a record of a $25,000 transfer to Mr. Dempsey. Would you like me to display them?" The judge gestured. "Proceed." Claire set up her laptop, projecting images onto the courtroom screen. Deposits marked from the SSA, withdrawals at luxury retailers, hotel bills in cities Althea had never visited. The numbers glared in black and white. The room buzzed with disbelief. Daniel let the silence stretch, then said, "No further questions." The judge turned. "Mrs. Cross, do you wish to cross-examine?" Martha's attorney, a thin, nervous man named Mr. Folsom, rose reluctantly. "Ms. Hensley, is it possible these funds were used for legitimate business purposes? For example, floral imports?" Claire's smile was razor-sharp. "I checked customs records. Mrs. Cross has not imported flowers in over a decade." The courtroom erupted again. Folsom stammered, "And no further questions." "Mr. Keene," the judge said, "do you have additional witnesses?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Leonard Price." Althea's heart thumped as Leonard made his way to the stand. He wore his worn jacket, his hat clutched in his hands. His eyes scanned the room once, briefly meeting Althea's, before he swore in. "Mr. Price," Daniel said, "how did you know the late Ms. Monroe, Althea's mother?" Leonard's voice was steady. "We worked together. She was my friend. Before she passed, she asked me to look out for Althea. Said she trusted her sister, but wanted me nearby, just in case." Daniel nodded. "And what have you observed regarding Mrs. Cross's care of Althea?" Leonard's eyes darkened. "I saw a girl wearing second-hand clothes while her aunt bought new jewelry. I saw Althea turned away from school activities because Martha said she couldn't afford the fees. And I saw Martha meeting Victor Dempsey late at night, passing envelopes I now know were full of cash." Martha lurched forward. "Objection!" Folsom barked, scrambling to his feet. "Speculation." "Overruled," the judge said, his tone sharp. "The witness may continue." Leonard's voice dropped lower. "Your Honor, Martha Cross didn't just misuse those benefits. She partnered with Dempsey to launder money. Everyone in town knows he owns half the police force. That's how she stayed untouchable all these years." The room exploded in whispers, the tension electric. Reporters scribbled furiously. The judge's gavel banged. "Order! Order in the court!" But Martha had already risen, her face red, her composure gone. "This is a setup. A witch hunt. I raised that girl. I fed her. I clothed her. She owes me everything." Althea stood slowly, her voice clear for the first time. "No, Aunt Martha. You owe me." The silence that followed was absolute. Judge Harmon's eyes narrowed behind his glasses. "This court will recess for 1 hour. And when we return, Mrs. Cross, you will have the chance to explain these allegations, or face the consequences." The gavel came down, echoing like a thunderclap. As the crowd spilled into the hallway, Althea's heart pounded. The trial had turned, but the battle wasn't over. And in Martha's furious glare as she was escorted out, Althea saw something she had never seen before. The courthouse cafeteria hummed with voices, the air thick with the smell of burnt coffee and fried food. Althea sat alone at a corner table, staring at her untouched sandwich. Her appetite had vanished hours ago, somewhere between Claire's forensic evidence and Leonard's damning testimony. The trial was tilting in her favor, but she felt no triumph. Instead, unease pressed against her ribs. For the first time, she saw clearly how wide Martha's net had stretched. How many hands had dipped into the funds stolen from her childhood? How many of her own blood had chosen silence? "Althea." The voice made her flinch. She looked up. Her cousin, Rachel, stood there in a pale blouse and neat skirt, her blonde hair tucked behind one ear. Rachel had always been the quiet one in family gatherings, the shadow at Martha's side, the polite smile that never lingered. Now, she slid into the chair opposite Althea, her hands twisting together. "I needed to see you," Rachel said softly, "before you hear it in court." Althea's throat tightened. "Hear what?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Aunt Martha. She asked me to help her. With the paperwork. I forged signatures. I withdrew money. I told myself it was for you, that she was using it right. But I knew. Deep down, I knew it wasn't." Althea's stomach knotted. "You helped her steal from me." "I didn't think I had a choice," Rachel whispered. "She threatened me, said she'd cut me off, expose things She broke off, biting her lip. Althea stared at her. For years, she'd wanted a sisterly bond with Rachel, someone in the family who might understand her loneliness. And now she saw the truth. Rachel had been another cog in Martha's machine. "I can testify," Rachel said quickly. "If it comes to that, maybe it'll help you. Maybe it'll—" her voice faltered. "Maybe it'll make up for what I did." Althea wanted to scream, to lash out, but the weight of exhaustion pressed her down. "It won't make up for it," she said quietly, "but it might help." Rachel's eyes shone with shame. "I'm sorry." When court resumed, Althea braced herself. She didn't expect what came next. Martha's lawyer called their uncle, Harold, to the stand. He was a large man with a booming voice, the kind who dominated every holiday table with stories no one had asked to hear. "Mr. Cross," Folsom began, "how would you describe your sister's care of Althea?" Harold cleared his throat. "Exceptional. Martha sacrificed everything for that girl. She took on debt, worked long hours, never once complained." Althea's jaw tightened. Lies, dressed in confidence. Daniel rose. "Mr. Cross, are you aware that Martha received survivor benefits for Althea?" Harold hesitated. "Well, yes, but that money never stretched far enough." "And yet," Daniel said smoothly, producing a document, "records show that you received a $10,000 loan from Martha during that same period. A loan she never asked you to repay." The courtroom buzzed. Harold's face reddened. "That was personal. Family helping family." Daniel's voice sharpened. "Family? Or fraud? Did you ever ask where that money came from?" Harold shifted uncomfortably, but the damage was done. The jury had heard enough. By late afternoon, the judge called recess again. Althea stepped into the hallway. her nerves raw. She barely noticed Leonard approaching until he touched her arm. "You all right?" he asked. She shook her head. "It's not just her. It's all of them. Rachel, Harold, how many more? How deep does it go?" Leonard's eyes were heavy with sorrow. "Deeper than you want to know. That's the thing about family, Althea. They can love you, or they can feed on you. Sometimes both at once." Althea drew in a shaky breath. She thought of her mother's letter, the trust placed in Martha, the betrayal that had followed. Family had been her anchor once. Now it felt like a trap. Still, she lifted her chin. "Then I'll face them. All of them. However many it takes." Leonard nodded slowly, respect flickering in his eyes. "That's your mother's fire, right there." As Althea turned back toward the courtroom doors, she felt the shift inside her. This wasn't just about reclaiming money anymore. It was about breaking the hold Martha, and the entire corrupted branch of her family, had on her life. Whatever it cost. The final day of trial dawned gray and heavy, the sky over Willow Creek thick with storm clouds. Rain spat against the courthouse windows as people filed inside, their umbrellas dripping on the tiled floor. Word had spread far beyond the town limits. The case of Cross v. Monroe had become the most watched scandal in the county. Althea sat at the defense table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Daniel gave her a reassuring nod, but his eyes held the same weight hers did. This was it. Today, everything would be decided. Across the aisle, Martha adjusted her pearl necklace, her expression a brittle mask, but the fury simmering beneath her skin was obvious. The tightening of her jaw, the twitch of her fingers, the way she refused to meet anyone's gaze. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Harmon entered, his robe flowing, his expression stern. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are here to conclude proceedings in the matter of Mrs. Martha Cross's claim against Miss Althea Monroe, and the counterclaims presented in this court." He gestured. "Mr. Keene, your closing statement." Daniel rose, buttoning his jacket. His voice was calm, steady, but each word landed like a hammer. "Your Honor, this case began with Mrs. Cross presenting an invoice, $50,000 she claimed Ms. Monroe owed her for food, shelter, clothing. But the evidence has shown the truth is the opposite. Survivor benefits totaling $190,000 were collected by Mrs. Cross. Bank records prove that less than a fraction was ever used on Althea's care. The rest was siphoned into personal luxuries, into bribes, into transfers to Victor Dempsey, a man tied to financial crime in this very county. We have heard testimony from Claire Hensley, a forensic accountant, proving the trail of fraud. We have heard from Leonard Price, who witnessed late-night exchanges between Mrs. Cross and Dempsey. We have even heard reluctant admissions from within Mrs. Cross's own family. The truth is undeniable. Martha Cross did not sacrifice for her niece. She exploited her. She betrayed the trust of her late sister, of the government, and of this child who had no one else. Your Honor, Althea Monroe doesn't owe her aunt a cent. If anything, the debt lies on Mrs. Cross's shoulders. For every stolen opportunity, for every year Althea lived with less while her aunt lived with more. Justice demands that this court recognize the fraud for what it is. Daniel sat. The room was hushed, the storm outside rattling faintly against the windows. Judge Harmon turned. "Mr. Folsom?" Martha's lawyer stood, pale and sweating. His arguments were scattered, desperate. My client. She did what she thought was best. Raising a child is costly, exhausting. Perhaps her records weren't precise, but... Martha shot up suddenly, her voice shrill. "I gave that girl everything. She was nothing without me. Nothing." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Mrs. Cross, you will sit down or I will hold you in contempt." But Martha's composure had shattered. "They all took from me. Harold, Rachel, Dempsey, they all used me. And now she thinks she can stand there and judge me? That ungrateful little brat." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Althea rose slowly, her voice clear, steady. "You didn't raise me out of love. You raised me to profit from me. And today, that ends." Martha froze, her mouth snapping shut as if the words had struck her across the face. The judge's gaze swept the room. "I have heard enough. This court finds Mrs. Martha Cross's claim against Ms. Monroe not only without merit, but fraudulent in nature. Furthermore, the evidence presented will be referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation into financial misconduct and fraud." He looked directly at Martha. "Mrs. Cross, you exploited a child's tragedy for personal gain. This court will not tolerate it. Bailiffs, escort her from the courtroom." The gavel fell. The room erupted. Reporters surged toward the doors. Spectators buzzed with disbelief and vindication. The bailiffs moved swiftly, taking Martha by the arms as she shrieked and kicked, her pearls scattering across the floor like broken teeth. Althea stood frozen, her body trembling. She had imagined this moment, dreamed of it, but the reality felt heavier than victory. Relief warred with grief, grief for her mother's misplaced trust, grief for the family that had betrayed her. Leonard touched her shoulder gently. "It's over, kid. She can't touch you now." Claire stepped forward, her smile sharp but kind. "You fought, you stood up. That's more than most ever do." Daniel gave her a nod of quiet pride. "You won." Althea exhaled, her eyes closing briefly. When she opened them, she felt taller somehow. Not because the weight had vanished, it never would, but because she was finally carrying it on her own terms. As Martha was dragged past her, Althea caught one last glimpse of her aunt's face. The fury was still there, but beneath it, fear, raw and unmasked. And in that moment, Althea understood. Every lie had cost Martha something. And at last, the final bill had come due. Aftermath. The days that followed blurred into interviews, articles, paperwork. Martha was charged formally. Dempsey's name appeared in the headlines, his network unraveling under federal scrutiny. Rachel testified willingly, her voice shaking but resolute. Harold vanished from public view, his reputation ruined. And Althea? She walked through Willow Creek with her head high, no longer the girl in second-hand clothes, no longer the shadow under her aunt's roof. Her life was hers again. Fragile, uncertain, but hers. Standing at her mother's grave weeks later, she laid a single white lily on the grass. "I did it, Mom," she whispered. "She can't hurt me anymore." The wind stirred, cool against her face, and for the first time in years, Althea felt free. She needed it.